Rad. The golden age of 3D platformers. Once the 5th generation of consoles dawned on us, developers immediately began working away bringing the platformer genre into the 3rd dimension. Whether you owned an N64 or a Sony PlayStation, you would have had access to some of the best platformers ever developed. This generation of consoles saw some amazing platforming adventures. Whether you were Mario, Crash Bandicoot, Banjo-Kazooie, or Spyro the Dragon, you were always navigating a fun, cartoony character through a 3D world of obstacles. As the next generation of consoles hit the horizon, many developers tried to bring the 3D platformer to a new home. While some developers tried something new, experimenting with the new hardware, there were a few titles that attempted to recapture the classic, simplistic style of the previous generation of platformers. One of the most notable titles for doing this is Vexx. Vexx was developed by Acclaim Studios Austin, the same team that developed the Turok games back in the late 90s. How you go from this to this is beyond me. Vexx was a multi-platform game releasing on the GameCube, Xbox, and the PS2. I've heard mixed things about this game. It's one of those titles where the cover kinda reeks of edginess. Kinda like Tai 3. Though I'm sure it's nowhere near as bad as this one, so why don't we pop it in and find out for ourselves. Vexx begins with a pre-rendered cutscene explaining that, well...
and loosed hell upon Astara. Though 700 years have passed, to my lasting sorrow.
Okay, to be honest, I'm not even sure. It's narrated by what sounds like a high school theater student explaining to us that long ago things were good, or something, and then terror happened, and then Vexx's family was enslaved, I think? Okay, I don't know. After getting really pissed off, Vexx attacks his slaver only to be punished by the evil Lord Yabu, the big evil bad man. Vexx is then saved by his grandfather, who gets killed in the process. Hell-bent on revenge, he stumbles on these super magic evil claws that he decides to use to kill Yabu and save the world? Or at least I think we're saving the world. I don't recall any mention of Yabu enslaving the entire world, but the back of the game claims, "To hell with the princess, save the world." Ooh. However, the talons can never be removed. They're on him forever. Like, for real, I'm not making this up. The narrator straight up says they're on him forever.
The talons bound themselves to him forever.
Damn it! Yeah, it's not exactly the game you play for the story. It's just really cliche and silly, but whatever, I really don't care. I don't need an excuse to jump on platforms, just point the way and I'll do it. Directly after the opening, you're dropped into a tutorial stage that teaches you the basics of the gameplay. It's not long before you realize it controls exactly the same as Mario and Banjo. Jump? Check. Wall jump? Check. Hold shoulder button, then jump. High jump? Check. Hold shoulder button while running, then jump. Long jump? Check. You get the picture. Controls overall are smooth enough. Vexx controls very fluidly and the jumps are very responsive and accurate. I have no problem making pinpoint maneuvers and crossing platforms with these controls. It feels really nice. It's easily better than the controls in the Thai games, I can give it that much. Swimming controls, on the other hand, do take some getting used to. It's not hard to get stuck on stuffs, and steering Vexx in the water feels a bit stiff and awkward. What sets Vexx aside from Mario or Banjo is the combat system. According to the back, it has a revolutionary combo-based fighting system that takes platform gaming to all new heights. This is a pretty big claim considering. Combat works like this. You've got your basic attack that you can string into a 3-hit combo. Well, that's nothing new. However, you can press the shoulder button, then attack to do an uppercut. This will launch nearby enemies up into the air. You can also attack while airborne. This will make Vexx do a little backflip kick. Performing this on an airborne enemy will toss him further up into the air. If you string these two attacks together, you're able to juggle enemies up into the air, doing damage to them while keeping them from attacking you. It's kinda neat and it's pretty fun. However, I just never really understood the need to put combat in platforming games. Think of any amazing, really good platformer. Mario, Banjo, Spyro. Why do they all end in O? How many hits does it take to kill an enemy? 1, because it's just a simple obstacle. It's nothing you're gonna spend a lot of time fighting when there's platforming to do. I think the Sonic series serves as a great example of this. In all Sonic games prior to Sonic Heroes, enemies would just take a single hit to kill. But in a lot of modern Sonic games, they introduced health bars to the enemies, meaning you have to stop and fight them. This slows down the experience because you have to stop platforming and do some mindless button mashing before you can resume the game. Vexx has it right at first. In the earlier stages, enemies only take 1 or 2 hits to kill. That's great, that's how it should be the entire game. However, as you progress further and further, enemies do take more and more hits to kill. Obviously, it's just an excuse to try and make you use the juggling system they created. At least you can just run right by the enemies. There's never a point in time where you have to engage in combat with them. Because of this, it never really takes away from the game. It's just weird to see that they bothered trying to implement something you'd never really spend time using. That jump kick Vexx can do actually comes quite in handy as a double jump. I'm sure this was not intended at all, but you can get a little extra height and distance if you use it, allowing you to jump up into ledges you're probably not really supposed to get to. This allows for a lot of shortcuts and whatnot. As weird as it may sound, I love it when games have this kind of thing. Being able to use a simple little trick to take a cool shortcut. Just like Mario 64, if you were good enough at using a long jump and the triple jump and the wall jump and etc., you could skip little sections of the game. So if you're good enough and you can do it, by all means. Like the majority of 3D platformers, Vexx has a hub world that you'll access many different levels from. This game is probably the smallest and simplest hub world I've ever seen in my life. I don't know if you can even call this a hub world, it's more like a hub room. Presentation-wise, there's not really a lot to talk about here. Graphics are pretty whatever. Not great, not bad, just, whatever. The music is also fairly generic and forgettable, save for a couple of tracks like Timberdale, which actually managed to be fairly memorable. Vexx pretty much follows the exact kind of formula you'd expect it to. There's a big open level, get all of the things in it. While other games have bright, fun collectibles like stars and jigsaw puzzles, Vexx has, anatomically correct human beating hearts. Edgy. You know what, I bet this is probably the only reason this game is rated T. I don't know why they opted out for something so unsettlingly realistic in such an otherwise cartoony game, but again... One pretty interesting thing about the hearts is that you can feel them beating via the vibration in your controller, which helps you find out when one's nearby. You'll feel the vibration grow stronger as you draw nearer to it, and it's a nice little touch that helps out quite a bit. There's also 2 power-ups in the game, taking the form of lava armor that'll make you briefly invincible and faster, and a wingsuit that'll give Vexx a temporary ability to fly. Both of these power-ups are entirely situational, and you'll only ever need to use them if it's required to get a heart. Not only that, but very few hearts require them, so don't expect to be using these power-ups very often. Vexx sports 10 levels, each of which has a varied amount of objectives you'll complete in order to obtain hearts. Collecting more and more hearts will unlock more and more levels in which you can journey to collect more hearts, rinse and repeat until you're at 60, and then you can fight the final boss. Each stage has a sundial that'll allow you to change the time of day. As far as I know, it's only cosmetic and doesn't actually change anything outside of one objective. This involves having to find a portal that's hidden within each stage. It'll only open up if it's a certain time of day, so you can use the sundial to change it to that specific time of day so you can go into the portal. Though the sundial just tells you what time to put it at, making it kind of pointless. I think they could have just had the portals always open and then not have even bothered with this whole sundial thing. My favorite level in the game is Tempest Peak Manor, a giant living room where you'll navigate your way past books, pillows, and other giant-sized everyday objects. There's a pretty cool puzzle involving having to turn on a television and the game console connected to it, but then it makes you play this frustratingly poorly designed block breaker minigame. It seems that for every chunk of good and fun objectives, there has to be one frustrating or poorly designed one. I find myself having a great time getting most of the hearts, but about every 1 in 6 hearts you'll find yourself getting pretty angry, dying again and again due to some unintentionally cheap or awkward level design. Take this little platforming section for example. We've got a row of platforms that change size and sequence, so you have to time your jumps correctly to get down there. Okay, so now that you're down there and you've hit the switch, it's time to come back. The platforms don't move or reverse the timing whatsoever, meaning you suddenly get to have a hellishly tough time making your way back. They were designed to travel one way, but not the other way. So it might have been a lot of fun to get down there, but it's no fun at all trying to get back up. These parts are few and far in between, but they just feel so unpolished, like they could have been good if a little more effort was put into fine-tuning them. The final level is a huge contender for this. Platforms are very thin and constantly moving, not to mention there's a bunch of rings spinning wildly around them, knocking you into the abyss if you get struck by one. These parts of the game are really hard, and I'm not talking like fair hard either. I just ended up getting really mad at these parts of the game because I just couldn't complete them. The game may have a silky smooth control scheme, but if the level design decides to take a dip in performance, well, that just isn't really reasonable. Unfortunately, Vexx suffers from a lot of difficulty spikes thanks to these unpolished platforming sections. You might be having a blast one moment, but the next, you'll be tearing your heart out. If only you could tear your heart out, then you'd already have one, so you wouldn't have to do the objective. The bosses in the game are also super frustrating. There's this sumo guy that I straight up just could not beat. I have about an hour or so of footage of me trying to beat him, but there's so little room for error because it's so easy to get launched off the stage and die instantly. There's also a mummy boss which, while not as hard, takes ages to fight because waiting for his attack cycles to finish takes so long. Luckily, you don't have to do these boss battles. In fact, there's a lot of objectives you can just skip. Like Mario 64, you only need a portion of the hearts in the game, meaning you are able to skip the ones that give you too much trouble. That being said, you still need a lot of them, so you will have to bite the bullet and trudge through some of the more frustrating missions sometimes. In each stage, there is one heart for collecting all 100 orbs. I did not do a single one of these because Vexx somehow manages to make collecting 100 of an item more cumbersome than ever before. It's not so bad in Mario games since there's plenty of coins, and it's not too bad in Gex since the fly coins are fairly easy to track down and find. Hell, it wasn't even that bad in Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. But in Vexx, you have to go out of your way to search every inch of the level, including the sub-areas that you would normally only go to if you want to fulfill a specific objective. Not to mention, there are long-ass loading screens between the main area and the sub-areas. Monotonous loading screens are plentiful in Vexx. Not only does it take a while to load each stage, but the slightest change in area will make you sit through yet another one of them. The worst area in the whole game is definitely this one right here. Enter the sub-area, loading screen. Go into this room to activate that switch, loading screen. Hit switch and go back, loading screen. Enter next room, loading screen. Hit switch and return, loading screen. Loading screen, loading screen, loading screen. There's too many of them! I don't know if it loads faster on GameCube or Xbox, but I've been playing the PS2 version and it got a little nerve-wracking with the amount of loading I had to sit through. Sometimes the loading screens are worth it, other times not so much. Vexx is just such a hit-and-miss game. Hit-and-miss with about 70% accuracy. You may be having a great time with the game's high points, but just be prepared to march through some mud every now and then. Especially the final boss. Lord, the final boss! This is the most frustratingly unfair final boss I've ever fought in a platforming game. Like the sumo boss, I could not beat him. He has attacks that'll hit you if you happen to be touching the ground when he executes them. There's also no warning or wind-up animation giving you a window of time to react. You have to have lightning-fast reflexes to beat this guy. After 2 hours of trial and error, I did get pretty close, nailing him down to a single unit of health. But there's only so much crap I can take from in a boss fight. I mean, at this point I've pretty much experienced all of the good parts of the game, so why would I really bother with the terrible final boss fight? I apologize for not beating the game. I usually always beat a game before I feel I have the right to judge it. But I just couldn't beat the guy, and I'm not prepared to sit down for hours on end trying to do so. In conclusion, Vexx is a pretty interesting title. It delivers a very mixed experience. It's mostly good, but it's not all good. It also doesn't really do anything new. It's the same kind of platforming experience we've already had with Banjo and Mario. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it, I guess? At its best, Vexx is a fun platforming game with good level design and awesome controls. At its worst, it's a frustrating game that lacks the polish needed to make it a completely solid experience. Though it is better than Ty 3, I can assure you that. It's definitely not the best platformer in the world. It has its ups and downs, though the ups do outweigh the downs, so it's not half bad. If you do happen to find it local for like $10 or less, I say go for it, pick it up. It's definitely a love letter to Mario and Banjo. It's a meal that's not really as tasty as the ones you'd find at the high-class Nintendo restaurant, but it does make for a nice little snack. Unlike previous platforming games I've talked about, Vexx only released as a single game, never seeing a sequel, which is much unlike the next series of platforming games I will be talking about. So stay tuned, because next time we'll be platforming without the use of our arms and legs. Thanks for watching. Hello and welcome to the ending slate. If you're still in the mood for more platforming games, you can check out the two I did previously. I did a trilogy of videos on the Tai series and the Gex series. If you want to go for Tai, click the video on the left. If you want to go for Gex, click the video on the right. I don't know how I went this whole video without making a joke about how Gex rhymes with Vexx, though I think at one point I accidentally said Gex instead of Vexx, so I guess that kind of took care of itself. Don't forget to click the like button if you liked the video, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to subscribe. It all helps me out a lot, and I'd greatly appreciate it. So I'll see you guys all next time. Have yourselves a great night, and take care. Edgy. Oh, edgy. Oh, edgy. Oh, look how edgy I am. Reggie. Edgy Fizame. Edgy Fizame. Lord.